Okay? Obviously, it says that God made the heavens and the earth. That's including everything. But he specifically created something on day one. Somebody tell me, what is it? Right, I heard somebody whisper, light. That is correct. He separated the light from the darkness, and he called the light day and the darkness night. Okay, day two, what did he specifically create? You can use an open book. This is an open book test if you want. But what did he create on day two? Well, the earth was there at the very beginning, so, because it says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Somebody's giving me a hand motion about what it is, but I don't hear the words. So you know, what is it? Yeah, he separated the waters from above to the waters below, created what's called an expanse. Okay, how about on day three? Scared now. The grass on day three, but the first thing he did is bring land out of plants. So you are correct. You get her stuff, the celestial body. Fish and the birds. Day six. Before man, he created land animals. Okay. All right. So, based on what the scripture says, using the Bible, when did Triceratops live? On day six, because he is a land animal. All dinosaurs are land animals. So that is exactly the case. But wait a minute, because now we've got some problems. Because that means that man and dinosaur were there at the same time, according to the Bible. So how do we deal with that? You got to keep in mind that this is a big challenge. I mean, Jesus himself, he said, I've spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. And isn't that what our culture is thinking right now? You know, they think if dinosaurs and evolution are millions of years true, then the Bible can't be true, right? So he says, if you don't believe the earthly things, then how will you believe the heavenly things? If that's the case, people won't know the gospel, and that's why we need to be equipped with these kinds of answers. So let's look at this a little later. Okay, what dinosaur is this? T-Rex, all right. Now, a more challenging question, what did the first T-Rex eat? Again, I'll make it easier, multiple choice, meat or plants or both or something completely different. That you've seen the movies, flesh-eating killers, and I have personal experience in that area too. However, we need to use the Bible in plants for food. How many people knew that? Okay? But also, he gives man, in the verse before that, he gives man plants for food. So, before the fall, you've got to understand there was no death, no suffering, and that was both of man and animals. It was a perfect paradise, just like the one that it is with being created in the future for us by God, right? That new heavens and that new earth. So if Genesis is true, all right, then we and the dinosaurs and the lions and tigers and bears, thank you, all right, great, were originally not dying nor killing. And you might be thinking, okay, you guys claim to be scientists, but obviously this is a killing machine. Those sharp teeth look like they were designed as weapons to kill, right? Well, let's take a look at a particular species, all right? The teeth in the front look like they were designed to hold the prey, and the teeth in the back are so sharp they could cut a piece of paper. So what species do you think this creature is? Anybody? It is a fruit bat. Okay, I didn't say it was a dinosaur. I wasn't trying to trick you, okay? I just said, what species is this animal? Now, does anybody want to take a wild guess about what the main diet of a fruit bat might be? Anybody want to go out on a limb here? In fact, this animal with those very sharp teeth eats no meat. Teeth does not mean that it eats meat. Any creature. How about this guy? What species is this? Come on, I need to shake you out. I know it's early in the morning, but... Or it might be a deer. And it is. This is a deer that lives in China today. It looks exactly like this. It eats absolutely no meat. It only eats leaves, berries, and saplings. So again, another creature with killer teeth that eats no meat. All right? How about this one? I'll give you a hint. It's a bear. All right? It's a terrifying, ferocious panda bear that eats absolutely no meat. So again, sharp teeth does not mean that it eats meat. It only means what? It has sharp teeth. Has anybody here ever carved a pumpkin? And what did you use to carve your pumpkin? A sharp knife, exactly. So, I've given you examples, and I could actually give you hundreds more of creatures that we know that live today that have terrifying looking teeth that eat no meat. You with me? So, does this make any sense? It actually does. All right? Now, I don't want you to go home and tell people that the science guy said that dinosaurs, weren't carnivorous. They were after the fall. But before the fall, there was no death of any kind of humans nor animals. It was a perfect place. Interestingly enough, a lion that was being brought in as a pet, his name was Tyke, all right? And this farmer who just thought it was a great idea to have a pet lion couldn't get the lion to eat any meat. He even gave a reward to any vet that could get him to eat meat. They put one drop of blood in milk and he would turn it away. He lived his entire life, in fact, lived a long life without ever eating any meat. Okay? So these ideas, again, biblical glasses, all right? They definitely, the dinosaurs did eat meat after the fall, but not before. Okay, next question. Were the dinosaurs on the ark? Well, we need to use the Bible as our guiding point. And of course, the Bible says, brought every living kind or thing that to the ark. It doesn't say two of every kind except for dinosaurs, does it? So, but the next question we would have is how in the world did he fit those huge creatures in there? It's like he has a space problem there, right? But again, we need to consider this question from a biblical standpoint. So the first thing we would like to consider is really how big was the ark? I mean, does anybody know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, the measurements are given to us, all right? And it probably was a minimum of 450 feet, 75 feet wide, and about 45 feet high. And you can see the people on top to give you an idea of the scale of how big this vessel was. It was so big, it could hold railroad cars that would make a train 8 miles long. And that train, if it were stock cars, could hold 125,000 animals the size of a sheep. And yet today, only 11% of animals alive today, land animals alive today, are bigger than a sheep. So we actually have a lot of room in this vessel. In fact, using a geneticist study called baraminology, we believe that there were about 16,000 individuals needed in order to get the entire DNA diversity that we have in the world today. 16,000 animals. It didn't look like this, okay? And we need to get that idea out of our children and grandchildren's minds, to be honest. Because see, here's the thing. It's not a fairy tale. This really happened. The evidence for the worldwide flood is overwhelming. And we need to be giving people the true story of what happened there. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but dinosaurs are huge. I mean, how in the world could they have fit? But you've got to remember that actually only a small percentage of dinosaurs were really, really big, okay? Lots of them were just little tiny things smaller than a chicken. You don't hear about them because if they did that in the movies, it wouldn't be scary anymore, right? However, many of them were small. Now, this is a toy, my son's toy dinosaur that he had when he was a little boy. And he would go around the house and show it to my friends and say, this is a life-size dinosaur. This is a life-size dinosaur. Now, is this really life-size? Maybe it is. Got to keep in mind that at one time, this is a life-size dinosaur because every dinosaur came from an egg. The largest dinosaur egg ever been found, and it was from one of the huge sauropods, was just a little bigger than a football. Okay? So you've got to remember that, would God bring some really big, old, stinky grandpa dinosaurs onto the ark? And I wasn't looking at any stinky grandpa when I said that. Or would he have brought some young dinosaurs, pre-adolescents, had lots of breeding years left and were really healthy? So we know how big it is. The animals don't have to be big, but then your next question might be, but there's so many dinosaurs. Still, there's tons of them. In fact, right now they've identified over 700 species of dinosaurs. But the number one dinosaur paleontologist in the world, all right, from Montana State University, he says, no, there actually aren't 700 species. In fact, this dinosaur that they said were 3 species, he said has growth patterns in the same animal as it grew up. So we, in fact, can fit plenty in there. Because, see, the Bible doesn't say he brought 2 of every species to the ark, does he? He brings 2 of every what? Kind. So what is a kind? Well, let's start out with something you're more familiar with, dogs. Now, on the left there is Gibson, who in 2004 was the world's largest dog. And down below is Boo Boo, who in 2007 was the world's smallest dog. It kind of looks like Gibson's thinking about having a snack, doesn't it? He's thinking about it, right? But guess what? In addition to mapping the human genome, you've probably heard about that. That was a great scientific accomplishment. They've actually mapped the dog genome of different breeds, and this is what they discovered. They discovered that all dogs, including Gibson and Boo Boo, descended from a common kind of dog that was wolf-like. In fact, they put it on the cover of their magazine, all right? So guess what? There was one wolf kind, or one dog kind on the ark, one cat kind, okay, one dromedary kind, and we believe about 50 kinds of dinosaurs. So where do we get that from? Of course, we already mentioned this is Triceratops, and Triceratops belongs to a group that's called a genus called the ceratopsian dinosaurs. Now you see the similarity between all these? They all have frills and little horns on the edge of their frills in the back, little shields. But you see, there was one ceratopsian kind of dinosaur on the ark, totaling about 50 kinds of dinosaurs. So there were only about 100 dinosaurs on the ark, and they weren't huge. Plenty of room. Okay? But then the next question is, if the 100 that were on the ark, were saved, what happened to the others? Somebody tell me, what happened? Yeah, they died, all right? Because there was a worldwide catastrophe. And a few of them, not many, but a few of them became buried, and some of them became fossils. And today, the scientists and paleontologists are discovering a number of dinosaur bones and fossils. In fact, the very first dinosaur bones were found and identified in the 1800s. Did you guys know that? That before the 1800s, nobody had even considered the concept of what a dinosaur was because their bones hadn't been found and identified yet. Now, a lot of people think that the way that fossils are formed is that, the dinosaur is slowly buried over millions of years. This is the typical story. And then millions of years over a slow and gradual process, they're turned to fossils. But we need to look at the fossil record using our biblical glasses and find out if that makes any sense. For example, if you go not too far from here, you have Dinosaur National Monument. And mixed in with these dinosaurs, we find clams. So do clams and dinosaurs live together? No. It means that they were killed and brought by a catastrophic flow of water, mud, and silt into this area. It's a sign of catastrophe, not over millions of years of this dinosaur being slowly buried and just happen to have a clam sitting next to it. That doesn't make sense. So is it really millions of years, or is it the result of a catastrophic flood? Let's take a look at some more fossils. Here on the left, you have Protoceratops, and on the right is Velociraptor. And these were found in this position where Velociraptor's arm was inside Protoceratops' mouth. Okay? Now, does that look like something that happened over millions of years, that it was slowly buried over millions of years? Now, this looks like a catastrophe, doesn't it? It was buried quickly. Now, they've only found about 1,200 complete dinosaur skeletons to this date, but they've found millions of these, and that's dinosaur tracks. They're all around. Now, let me ask you a question. Has anybody ever had a deer track or an animal track in their backyard? And how many millions of years do those tracks last? No, they're gone pretty quick, right? Just the next rainfall or something like that. Well, that's the case with these dinosaur tracks as well. We believe that this is from the two-toed hadrosaur, all right? And in fact, on the left there, it shows the pattern that the left foot was planted, but the right foot is slipping, okay? So there's a force pushing against this dinosaur. Actually, there's two forces. One of them is gravity because it's going uphill. The second one is water. And the reason we know that is because these are ripple marks, which would have been made by some pretty rapidly moving water pushing against the dinosaur. And as it's succumbing to what appears to be a flood, it's just got its tippy toes as it's trying to go uphill in order to try to preserve its life. All right? So, using your biblical glasses, this is not millions of years. I mean, the only way you can save these is if it was buried again. There has to be another layer put on top of it, and then for that layer to be eroded or exposed later in order to show this tracks. All right, next question. Is the word dinosaur in the Bible? And the answer is no, it's not. And there's a good reason for it. The word dinosaur wasn't invented until the 1800s. Remember me talking about when they discovered the first dinosaur? So this guy made up the word. It means terrible lizard. However, this word came into existence many, many years after the first English translations of the Bible. So, of course, the word dinosaur wouldn't appear. And, however, there is a word in the early English translation, specifically the King James Version. There is a word that reminds us a little bit about a giant reptile that would have claws and teeth and horns. Okay? It actually appears 17 times in the Old Testament. The Hebrew word is tanin. And does somebody know what the English translation in the King James, that word that reminds you of a terrifying giant reptile, what would that be? Well, Leviathan is in there a few times, and he was a marine creature. Behemoth was a sauropod. He's in there a few times, but more prevalent than that is the word dragon. Okay? In the King James, not probably going to be in your modern translations. It is the word tanin, okay? And these dragons appear to be referring to monstrous creatures, reptilian and dangerous. Some of it is metaphor, but some of it is talking about real creatures. So here's the idea I'd like to consider over the next few minutes. Were these dragons actually dinosaurs? The dinosaurs that we know. Are they legend? Are they expressions of something that really occurred? Or are they real history? Because you've got to understand that not only does the Bible talk about dragons, but the reason it does is because it appears in over 1,000 history books over millennia. On every continent except Antarctica, there are dragons told to us as if they were real history. And in almost every case, a man is slaying the dragon, including Marco Polo. We believe his accounts on everything else, but he claims to have killed a dragon. Okay? And the descriptions of these dragons that are left with us, both in artwork and in text, reflect what we know about dinosaurs. So, you willing to use your biblical glasses and examine that idea for a while? Take a look at this dinosaur. This is a real dinosaur. His name is Dracorex, all right? And an artist's conception of what he looked like was put on the cover of a Christian magazine that you might be familiar with, all right? And if you notice there, that is a real dinosaur. And if I had hired Disney to draw a picture of a dragon, would it have been much different than this? Okay? Yet the descriptions and the artwork, and like I said, it's all around the world. We have accounts of dragons, both in Europe and in China. Of course, in France, we have St. George and the Dragon, probably the most proliferated dragon story. And yet every time in artwork he is portrayed, if you've ever been to France, it's an iguanodon. That's the dragon. That's what they called it, but could it be a dinosaur? Even on this continent, of course. in Utah, Texas, and Arizona. They have the legend of the mighty Thunderbirds the Native Americans did. All right? And I think it's no coincidence that the fossils we find of the mighty Quetzalcoatlus, a large flying pterosaur, which, by the way, they drew on their cave walls or on their rock walls, matches what they did. So is it possible that humans saw these pterosaurs? Seems to be. Going back up into Utah, okay, we have what appears to be a sauropod dinosaur. Hundreds of years before the first dinosaur bones were discovered, this was painted on the wall. So how did humans know what that creature looked like? Okay, we go back into Europe, all right, and carved around this man's tomb who died almost 300 years before the first dinosaur bones were described. We have both, he's got carved in the brass, there's fish, dog, pig, and bird, and this creature right here, which appears to be a sauropod. Here we have a protoceratops that is dated at 4,000 years. How did a human know what a protoceratops looked like? And one of my favorites here in Cambodia at the Angkor Wat Temple, which was dedicated in 1186 AD, almost 700 years before the first dinosaur bones were discovered, they carved this creature right here. And most of you can recognize what that is. Does somebody know? It's got alternating plates on the back, that frill on the front. Stegosaur. Okay, I've had children tell me it's a stegosaur. Come on now. But 700 years before the first dinosaur bones were discovered, indicating that perhaps man had seen these creatures before, because there's nothing else that looks like this in the world. And in fact, we have a book back there, a coffee table book, a high-quality production book that you can put on your coffee table, and the next time you have family over, those people that maybe think you're a little crazy for believing the Bible, you could start looking through about 100 examples of artwork that they call dragons specifically, but are clearly dinosaurs. All right, now, next question. Does the Bible say anything about dinosaurs? I already know you guys know about Leviathan and Behemoth. And, of course, the story of Behemoth is in the book of Job, all right? And interesting, as you know, Job had some really bad stuff happen to him, right? And he has a good question. It's like, why? Right? And his friends come and give him an answer, but it's not the right answer. And finally, God doesn't give him an answer. Did you notice that? He doesn't give him a direct answer to the question why. What he does is he takes him on a tour of his creation. Okay? He talks about all the different animals that he created as well as the world. And through 4 chapters, he said, Job, consider this. Consider the mountains and the hills and the great trees. And look at all these different animals that I created. Could you do that, Job? Can you do that? And so what he's doing is he's trying to show Job that indeed, and finally he spends an entire chapter on this creature, Behemoth. Okay? And he's basically saying, hey, I created Behemoth, this massive creature. Can you do that? And there's a lot of speculation about what this huge creature could be. In fact, in a footnote of the most popular English translation of the Bible, it says it's a hippopotamus or an elephant, or that it could be. So let's compare the hippo and the elephant to what we now know to be the sauropod. Now, Job says that he eats grass. So do hippos eat grass? Yeah, you bet. How about an elephant? You bet. And does sauropod? Actually, it does. Remember, about 2/3 of dinosaurs were herbivores, not carnivores. And one of the reasons we know that is because scientific proof in this, coprolite. Okay, this is a slice of a fossil of coprolite. Does anybody know what coprolite is? It's a fancy word for what dinosaurs do after they eat. And what we found is inside there that they do have grasses that they ate. Also, Job describes Behemoth as having bars of iron, so big bones. Do elephants have big bones? Okay, how about hippos? Yeah, how about sauropods? Okay. It says that he has a tail like a cedar tree. And of course, the cedars used to build the temple were huge, monstrous trees. All right? But does this look like a cedar tree to you? Okay. So I believe that perhaps that this creature that's mentioned in Job in the 40th chapter is perhaps one of these huge sauropods. In fact, it even says that he could stand in the middle of the river Jordan during flood stage and keep his head above water. And today, the Jordan is 45 feet deep at flood stage. Okay? You think an elephant or a hippo could do that? But yet one of these great sauropods could do that. So last question to consider. Last year when you were in the zoo, did you see any dinosaurs? Okay. Now, the evolutionists have a lot of theories about what happened to them. You know, they've gone extinct. Of course, you've heard the great asteroid impact theory, all right? Not all evolutionists agree with this idea because there's a lot of problems with it, because why did the turtles and the crocodiles and mammals and snakes survive and only the dinosaurs died off? But the bottom line is that the evolutionists don't know what happened to the dinosaurs. All we know is that they died. That's all we know, okay? And we can speculate. Now, do you think that after the flood, which we see the evidence for, there was a great ice age? Like, we have entire books written about that, none of them with us today, about this ice age. Do you think ice age would play a role in large, cold-blooded reptiles? You bet. Do you think disease would have an impact? Or a lack of food source brought on by a post-flood world for these huge creatures that need a lot of food? And have other animals gone extinct before? Sure, there's a lot of causes of extinction, but I'd like to bring out another idea that I've hinted about, if you don't mind. And that is, did man have a role in their extinction? So, God later on, even though we were only allowed to eat plants when it was a perfect world, later on God said that we could eat meat. So do you think this is a possible scene? You know, today there have been videos of a single man with one spear able to bring down an elephant without any help, because he's a skilled hunter, knows where the kill zone is. With a good shot, with one stab of a spear, you can bring an elephant down if you hit just the right place. Okay? And if any of you guys came home this afternoon and there was an elephant in your backyard, you know, you ladies especially, you're going to tell your husbands to take care of it. You know, it's going to ruin the garden. It's going to maybe knock down the house, right? But here's the idea I'd like to give to you. Is it possible that in the past, when men were trying to protect their villages from these dragons that were out to get them, also destroying their gardens by stomping on it, knocking down huts and homes, right? But maybe more important than that, they would go down in history, where we have thousands of records of history books of men slaying the mighty dragon and being renowned for it, being the hero of their village. Does that make sense? So I believe that that's what history has told us. So the next time somebody asks you if you believe in the age of dinosaurs, I'd like you to say no. That you believe in 5 ages of dinosaurs. That first God created them. Okay, and that they lived with people. But a disaster, the greatest disaster of all time, happened, and that's when the fall came. When death came to both dinosaurs and man and all kinds of creatures. Which was followed by the second greatest disaster of all time, and that's when God judged sin and brought a great flood that killed all but maybe 100 or so on the ark. But after they embarked somewhere along the line, they did survive, but many of them actually diminished to the point of being completely extinct until men wrote about them as dragons and did artwork to describe them, until finally they were rediscovered when we find their bones and their fossils, telling us the story of what happened to have. It's a summary of the Bible's account, in essence, that we can use with dinosaurs when it comes up. Basically, I'm trying to say, don't be scared of dinosaurs, okay? Because they actually can help us out. They're almost like evangelists. That the fossils are a record of death, but what we can do is talk about the gospel. You know, if we have a defense in our faith over those millions of years of evolutionary time, we can share. Because, you know, if we go to somebody and say, hey, Jesus loves you, and if they don't believe the Bible because they've been told over and over again that evolution in millions of years are a fact, then they're not going to believe you. If they've got questions that have never been answered, and maybe if you don't have the answer, I hope you can see that it can have an eternal consequence on people. In fact, that's what's kind of going on in our culture. And by the way, if our kids or our grandkids come to us and come home and ask us the questions, isn't it important for us to know the answers too? And that's why we need to be prepared with a defense for your faith. And I hope you realize that as we go on today. But evolution usually gets credit for forming dinosaurs over millions of years through the process of natural selection and random mutations with the survival of the fittest. But what we need to know is that dinosaurs were God's creation. In fact, he even bragged to Job about one of those colossal beasts. And what we need to do is, just like Job did eventually, is give God the Creator, the glory for what he created and what he has made, including those great dinosaurs. So, I appreciate it, and thanks a lot. How are we doing on time? When do I need to be done? Am I done now? 5 or 6. Okay, so we'll that's not very much time, but if you guys have some questions and answers, there's an answers book back there that has all the answers. But, no, I'm serious. Well, regarding the evolution creation thing, or I'll say 98% of all the questions I get answered are in here. But just in 5 minutes, if somebody has a question, go ahead and let me know. Yes, sir.
So, if an evolutionist was sitting right here today, what would his primary, because, you presented the biblical side, what would his primary argument be against what you just said?
Good question. Did you guys all hear his question? What would an evolutionist say to what I said? Well, there would be 2 responses I could think of. One would be emotional, which would probably be the first one. I'm an emotional being, and I usually respond emotionally when things come up. So one of the things he would say is that I and my colleagues are stupid and uneducated, and that he is understanding the science. But what he would say is, obviously the evidence points to dinosaurs in millions of years. But what I'm hoping to demonstrate today, and we're going to even talk about this even more in the next presentation, is that the evidence that that evolutionary scientists look and creation scientists look at, it's the same evidence. It's the same facts, all right? And it's 2 different interpretations of it, and it's up to us to decide which one makes the most sense, okay? So if he were to challenge me, I would just say, okay, what evidence supports? I'll give you, well, no, I'm not going to do that, because that would ruin my whole thing. Because I've got some other evidence to share about dinosaurs at the end of the presentation, about the last thing I'm going to do in the second one. But I would challenge him with some of the evidence. How can he explain, like, soft tissue in dinosaur bones? Or red blood cells in dinosaur bones? Because that's what's been found. How can he explain what's called polystrate fossils? Mostly trees, not animals, but you have fossilized trees in the Grand Canyon, not too far from here, and actually all around the world, where I talked to a guy on the plane about this just yesterday on my way here. Trees that go through, according to them, 120 million years worth of layers, and they're turned to stone right now. So did that tree sit there for 120 million years and wait to be slowly buried? And I think he's got a hard time. Now, I'm not going to say that we know everything, that from a creationist standpoint we got it nailed down. We're still doing experimentation and doing research, and we're figuring things out. But his viewpoint has a lot more problems with it than ours. And so he'd probably stick with the emotional response, but I'd have to wait until I could talk to him, and I'd like to use respect and especially use gentleness and respect, which 1 Peter 3:15, which is my favorite verse, tells me I need to treat everyone with gentleness and respect, because he's not stupid. And unfortunately, I've heard a lot of Christians say, well, it takes a lot more faith to believe in evolution, and kind of have a snide effect, but that's not going to win somebody over. We need to be respectful and gentle with them. So I would probably try to do the same, just like I did in the guy sitting next to me on the plane yesterday. He definitely didn't agree with me. But we just talked about some of the evidence, and I gave him a card of our website, and he's going to look at it. And I gave him my card and asked him to write any questions that he has for me. So, yes?
I firmly believe that the smarter we get as scientists, the more things point to God. In your book, you say there's most of the answers, 95% of the answers. What are the things that we still haven't learned about that we still can't reconcile with creation?
That's a fair question. The biggest problem that we have is what's called the starlight and time dilemma. I would say that's probably our biggest challenge that we're trying to figure out. Both secular scientists and creationist scientists have the same problem with starlight and time. They have something called the horizon problem. And since I have probably only a couple minutes left, I can't go really into it. There is a DVD back there on the table that gives a 20-minute summary of where one of our two major theories are to explain how starlight that from galaxies that are 13 billion light years away can get here in a short amount of time. And there is an explanation. And interestingly enough, secular scientists have the same problem with time. It's called the horizon problem, and it deals with cosmic background radiation and stuff that, right now you're thinking, well, I can't learn this. Well, you can. If you get the answers book and read the chapter on it, you'll be able to understand it. But that's probably our biggest challenge that we're dealing with. And there are two major waves of theories, both by Russ Humphreys and John Hartnett have the two major theories, and they're friends. They're not battling it out, but they're coming up with different solutions to that problem. And if I have one more minute left, you have that. Yeah. How do I deal with it? Well, carbon dating, again, it does, when you put a sample into a spectrometer, which is the machine, you do not get a date out. All you get is data. Get the ratio of the parent element to the daughter element, and it has to do with decay rates. So since I only have about 1 minute left, let me try to explain to you, if you got the answers book and read the chapter on it, but let me ask you guys a question, and it'll really help you understand the concept. Okay, let's say you go home today, and when you get home, there's water running in your house, a lot of water, okay? You figuring a pipe is broken, but you walk in the house, there's no water on the floor. Up on the second floor in the bathroom, the tub is going full force, okay? No one's home. What? So you pick up the 1 gallon pail that you have next to your bathtub. In my imaginary time, you have it. You put it underneath the faucet, and it takes 1 minute to fill up that 1 gallon pail. I want everybody to figure out, I'm going to ask you to do some math, okay? And after 1 minute, okay, then you measure the amount of water in the bathtub, and there's 15 gallons in the bathtub. Okay, how long did it take to put that much water in the bathtub? 15 minutes. Now, what you just did was very logical and reasonable, but you made a lot of assumptions, and I'll tell you what those are. Number one, you assumed there was no water in the tub when it started. You also assume that nobody added any or took any away. You also assume nobody played with the faucet, turned it up, down, on, off, that nobody was playing with the drain plug, and that there's no cracks in the tub. Okay? Now, that is where the assumptions that scientists use in radioisotope dating are lacking, and it's specifically their Achilles heel. Their problem is that the decay rate of radioisotopes in the past was faster at one specific time. We believe it was on day 4, okay, of creation. Can't prove that, but we do know from scientific evidence that the decay rate of radioisotopes accelerated in the past at one time, and using that as an adjustment, that is the answer of why we get those dates. So I think I'm out of time right now.